Todd. Welcome back to This is Horror.
Yes, thank you for having me. It has been a minute, hasn't it?
Yeah, when I was looking as to how long it's actually been 4 years and it does not feel that long.
It really doesn't, does it? A lot's happened.
Yeah,
You know, it a lot's happened for me, a lot's happened for you guys, a lot's happened in the world. So
yeah,
4 years feels like a long ass time.
right, yeah, yeah. And one of those changes for you has been turning 40. So
Yes.
I'm wondering, how was that for you? Did it come with any epiphanies? Did it come with any more existential dread than is normal? We've covered there's quite a lot of existential dread in
Yeah, like
general.
that's existential dread is, kind of what I subsist on most days. Turning 40 was not what I expected it would be. You know, you expect the midlife crisis kind of thing, or the weight of, oh my God, my life's half over statistically. um, but for me, it was kind of freeing in a way because I spent a lot of my 20s and 30s doing stuff I didn't want to do, working and making someone else rich. You know, just being a cog in a machine, and that definitely wasn't the lifestyle for me. Um, so turning 40, I'm 100% self-employed. Um, Granted, I wouldn't be able to do that without my wife, and her income, but still, I'm a full-time writer. I'm a full-time graphic designer. It's a complete 180 from what I was doing the last time we spoke. And so turning 40 was kind of like a reflection point for me where I could finally look back in the last 10 years and realize, hey, I like where I am. I like who I am. I'm happy. I couldn't say that at 30. 30 was a bad year for me. Just health issues, mental health issues severely. Um, if things had gone differently the year I turned 30, I may not, it's possible I wouldn't be here having this conversation. So the last decade was, I'm happy to say, a step up in all ways for me. And being able to look at look back, look at that, look at where I started and where I am, you know, it was a pleasant surprise for me. So I wasn't freaking out about turning 40. No, I was actually quite pleased with it.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of your mental health, would you say that now working full time has seen improvement to your mental health, that has contributed to it positively? And equally, spending such a long amount of the day, of the week, in solitude, have there been other things you've had to put in place, or perhaps unexpected challenges?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the mental health struggles are never going to go away. The depression, the anxiety, that's something I maintain on a day-to-day basis. Most days, I better living through chemistry. I take medication for my ailments, and it kind of sustains me day to day. Sometimes it's whatever's going on is still too much, and I kind of fall into that pit for a while and have to work my way out of it again. Just earlier this year, um, we had some storm damage to our house, our roof, and it's in the middle of winter, and I got to have part of my roof replaced. It's right after Christmas, so money's tight, and the insurance is screwing us around, and it was a lot. It was a lot. But then, a week later, I'm good, and I've been good since then. But it's still something that I have to be aware of. I have to be cognizant of how much sleep I'm getting. I have to be, aware of, did I eat today? Am I drinking enough water? These things. It sounds silly, but growing up, these weren't things I really had to think about. Um, one of the things that's happened since we last spoke, I found out I'm on the spectrum, which makes so much more sense now. Everything and put my whole life in perspective, and realizing why I am the way I am, why I see things the way I do, and how I react to certain things. It's definitely something that's way more in tune with myself. It allows me to be more in tune with myself, I guess I should say. Um, yeah, diabetic. Found that out. I knew that was coming. So the existential dread hasn't gone away, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It's still ever present, but I feel
Yeah.
like we're friends now. We're not we're not at odds. I've embraced
Yeah.
it. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent. What was the rest of your question?
No, no. I mean, it's all good. And I mean, you mentioned finding out that you're on the spectrum. And I think it was Gemma Moore who, when she found out, a recent thing, it was very liberating because
Mm-hmm.
it then helped to explain behaviors or ways of being that beforehand I recall she was saying, she felt like, what's wrong with me, or why am I
Yeah,
doing this? And it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. So it was quite a freeing experience. And of course, people can go back and listen to that conversation with Gemma, who will put it far more eloquently than I have.
she's got a good way of putting things more
Mm,
eloquent than any of us, really.
right. Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely freeing in a lot of ways to have that understanding. So, sorry, my cat is being bad. He wants attention because I'm giving you guys my full attention. So
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
it's a package deal. If you want me, you get the cats too.
It's okay. It's okay. And I mean, in terms of now doing this full time, how do you schedule your day? Or, I mean, do you schedule it, or is it more what kind of comes in and demands most attention is what gets your priority?
I mean, paying work, of course, always gets the priority. I have clients who come to me and they want a book formatted, or they want a cover, or they want a logo for their business. um I prioritize that. I kind of, if I have multiple projects going on at the same time, I'll kind of, I'll schedule like 2 hour blocks to work on each thing. And if it's a dry period, or if I'm in between projects, or I'm waiting on a client to say yay or nay, I switch gears and I work on my writing. So I can't say I'm a full time writer. I'm more like a 50% of the time writer. But I get to make my own hours. Like I said, I think it was before we started recording, I was up till 5 o'clock this morning working on my next book, and obviously I couldn't do that when I worked in an office, because I've always been a night person, but everybody who works in corporate is a sociopath who only who lives and dies by the 9 to 5, and that's just not how I'm wired. So it's quite nice to be able to set my own schedule and decide if I wake up one day and I'm like, I don't feel like working today, then I don't, and it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you said as well. that, I mean, you kind of see yourself as a 50% of the time writer rather than a full time. But I wonder if that is true, because I mean, often when we're talking to so called full time writers, and I find this for myself, there's only so much we can do in a day before we get diminishing returns. It feels like maybe there's kind of like, let's say, 2 to 4 hours
Yeah,
varying from writer to writer where you're going to be operating at your highest level, but then after that it is diminishing returns. So if you can get 2 to 4 hours in, you're probably a full-time writer anyway. And a lot of full-time writers, they're then filling the rest of the time with writing adjacent work.
yeah. 2 to 4 hours is kind of the sweet spot for me. Um, some days though, it's only an hour. Uh, but something I try to do every day is to at least make some kind of progress, even if I write one sentence in the manuscript. At least I can say, okay, I'm a little bit, a little bit further ahead than I was the day before. Um, it's kind of it's part of the mental gymnastics I have to do to keep myself in, above water, um, when it comes to just my own morale. So, every book, every story has its ups and downs. And, in terms of, you go through the motions as an artist, like, oh, this is the coolest idea I've ever had. Shit, nobody's going to read this. This sucks. Okay, I'm going to finish the fucker anyway. All right, I'm going to put it out in the world and people like it, great. And if they don't, oh well. And you kind of go through these motions through everything you do creatively. I do the same thing with client work. It's like I get about the halfway point and I'm thinking, they're going to hate this. But then you keep pushing forward and you start to be able to see the threads and see the pieces, how they fit together. Um, it's great.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel actually having the reservation or the idea that everybody might hate what you put out in the world can actually be a good thing, because it allows you to take more creative chances and to be bolder in your moves. And also, I think, if we've got a body of work and we're going to continue writing and putting out novels and putting out stories, the reality is that if people hate one book, I mean, so what in terms of the general overview of your work and of your life? But if we felt that we have to please everyone or get a kind of minimum token of
Yeah.
appreciation, then we're probably going to be less daring in what we do. And it's going to get a more lukewarm, tepid response, or it's just not going to be the kind of thing that is authentic and true to what we want to do.
Yeah. I forget who said it, but, um, if what you're doing isn't uncomfortable, you're not trying hard enough.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, so, that was kind of in the back of my mind after Devil's Creek came out and was a big success. And then I'm like, well, shit, does everybody expect like these massive tomes of, small town horror stories from me now? And it took me a little while to kind of find my footing again, because it felt like everything I wanted to work on was in danger of ballooning into this massive project. And that was the last thing I wanted at the time. Um, but there's also the element of, I want to please the fans, but at the same time, I have to be true to myself. And some people will be disappointed when the follow up to Devil's Creek, which is the book I'm working on now, as a matter of fact, is nothing like Devil's Creek at all. It exists in that universe, but it's an entirely different story, entirely new set of characters, and it's a it's not all existing in one place. It's happening in several places in succession, and it's got a different vibe. It's a, I'm a different person now than I was, 5 or 6 years ago when I originally wrote Devil's Creek.
Yeah, well,
So yeah,
yeah.
it's that's definitely that's always something in the back of my mind is, okay, well, the people who have followed my career, are they going to like this? And then I kind of have to put myself in check and remind myself that, like, I'm not doing this for them. And writing to me is or at least writing and storytelling is a very selfish act, because I'm writing because I love stories and I want to tell myself this story. It's wonderful that other people read it and love it and connect with it, but they're not. I try not to think about them at all when I'm actively writing a story and composing it. I'll deal with that later. I'll deal with, well, I can refine it, I can hone it, include this or take this out. But when I'm in a first draft, it's all for me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of when you're writing and like, let's say Devil's Creek, you put lightning in a bottle, and
Thank you.
if readers expect you to take that same bolt of lightning and put it into a different bottle, that's impossible. You can't do that. You're going to take something totally different and put it in a bottle. And I'm hoping I'm making sense here, but
No,
it's
you're
like,
making sense.
it's you can't, you may cover the same themes over and over and over again because those are your obsessions, your nightmares, your dreams. But for me, I couldn't present it the same way. I just, if someone paid me enough money, I could probably fake it. But if someone said, "Hey, we want you to write a sequel to Mojo Rising," write it exactly the same way. You're fucking crazy, man. I can't
Yeah.
do it. Um, uh, there's ideas that I have. They would be different. It would be a different project.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. And so if people are upset because your next book isn't Devil's Creek, well, guess what? They can just go read Devil's Creek again.
Mm-hmm.
That's, to me,
Yeah.
that's where you got to be with this stuff.
It's very much an example of how our stories are really just a reflection of us at the time. Like I went back recently and looked at the first novel I ever wrote, and I couldn't write that now. I'm not a 17-year-old kid pissed off at the world. I'm still pissed off at the world, but for different reasons. But, I've got, 30 years of experience, almost 30 years of experience now on top of it. But, at the same time, it's cool to look back and think, okay, well, no one else could have written that but me at that age, at that time, in that environment. And it's, it's almost like a time capsule of sorts. And it's very much a a mirror of ourselves at certain stages of our life.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You got to be careful saying that, though. Readers going to start thinking that you are your characters.
Oh God.
Well, nobody who listens to This Is Horror would think that. We have smart and discerning listeners and viewers.
Oh my God, how could you write such awful stuff? Are you a psychopath? I've had
Yeah.
that question before from extended family, as a matter of fact.
Oh no,
Yeah.
not from within the
I
family.
shut that shit down real fast.
You told them that you were a psychopath, didn't you?
They're like, did you hurt small animals when you were a child? And I'm like, no, I write horror fiction so I don't hurt people like you.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
It's a
It's a
great answer.
good way to stop a conversation. But I totally agree with your work being a kind of time capsule. And
Mm.
I mean, if I look back at my own work, then even if it wouldn't be obvious to the reader, I can tell what place I was in and what I was
Mhm.
thinking, and it's just a much cooler way of keeping a diary in a way.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's a hidden diary. It's a secret
If you, I
diary
mean,
with your feelings and your messages.
pick
And
out a scene from any of my books, and I could probably tell you where I was when I wrote it,
yeah,
and what I was listening to or what inspired it, and it's cool like that. That's one of the things I love about the craft, and and what I love, especially because being in the business, you get to know your peers and know other authors, and it's really cool when you're a fan of theirs and you get to know them, and it's like then you can just ping them and say like, "Hey, am I reading your book? Was this inspired by da 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 da?" And they can answer or
yeah,
tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm right. Um, I don't know. It's all fun. That's fun to me. That's a fun part of the whole, being a writer is, seeing, being able to pick apart and see like where did this come from? And what inspired you to take this completely different element and mash it together and somehow it works when it absolutely shouldn't.
yeah. And I think much as we can't step into the same river twice, we can't write the same story twice. If I were to write the girl in the video now, then it would be a completely different story to the one that I wrote, back in whenever I wrote it, maybe 2019, maybe 2018. I don't know. Time is confusing and the pandemic has distorted it even
Uh,
more. But
Time isn't
I,
real.
yeah,
It's not real.
there you go. But yeah, it would be a different book. And I mean, just as we have to decide a kind of time to release the book, to send it to the editors, to send it to the agents, even after I've published a book, there will be times where I'll think, if I was still writing it, this is what I'd now
Mhm.
change and do differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So many things I would go back and change about, you know, all of my stories, little
Yeah,
things here and there that people would never notice. Some things people would notice. All the folks who complained about too much sludge and worms and stuff coming out of people's orifices in Devil's Creek, I would just do more of that. Just out of spite, really. But, you know, I'm
Go
just
hard
being
or go home, man.
I'm
That's the
just
way
being
I see it.
facetious.
yeah.
Or am I?
It's a simple answer as to write a motivation. Why did you do it? Out of spite.
Out of spite.
Simple
That's
as that.
so much of my writing career can be attributed to spite because somebody said I couldn't do something
Yeah,
or shouldn't do something. Like, well, fuck you, I'll do it anyway and I'll make it work. And then I'm going to rub
yeah,
your face in it.
yeah. I don't know which is more kind of motivating, if somebody says you shouldn't or if someone says you couldn't. Maybe couldn't just edges out shouldn't, but they're
There's
both gonna
this
make you want to do it.
there's this comic strip that I always think of when the topic of spite and motivation comes up, and it's this 4-panel comic of this little kid, and his mother is telling him not to make a face like that or else it'll stay that way. And then he goes on to like the next panel is like him winning an award for best face, and he's making the face, and he like gets really successful because of his face. And the last panel is him like he's got a medal around his neck and he's like pointing to it to his mom, making the face. That always just reminds me of that. Like that's I relate to that so much. And the first thing that comes to mind as well as the comic strip is a teacher that I had in college. My junior year of college, so this would have been 2004, 2003, 2004. She has since gone on to become a New York Times best-selling author. I'm not going to say her name. Her book was made into a Lifetime movie, but the first day of class, she told us that she would not accept any genre fiction, that it had to be traditional literary tight-assed fiction. And to me, I find a lot of that stuff boring. So I spent the entire class, the entire semester, writing stuff that would piss her off. I got a B in the class. The only writing class in college I did not get an A. And I'm hoping that in my career I can reach a point where I'm also a New York Times best-selling author, because I'm going to look her up and just email her out of the blue and say, hey, this is genre fiction. Remember that thing you told me not to write?
It'd be even sweeter if you could, capture the New York Times best-selling list, and then your book is, a number of positions above
Yeah.
hers. That would be beautiful.
Yeah, that would be something. But that's a good example of spite being a motivator. That's just one example of someone telling me not to do something because of X, Y, and Z reasons, and that runs entirely in opposition of where I want to go. And so it becomes a mission of proving someone wrong.
Yeah, well, it seems to be working out
So
fairly
far.
well so far. Yeah, yeah.
People are probably listening to this and they're like, man, he's such an asshole. God, holding a grudge for 20 years? Well, you should meet the rest of the Keislings.
There you go. And I mean, I know another change since we last spoke is getting your agent, Becky.
Yes.
So I want to know about how that came about, how you initially met, and then how that's going for you.
So I made a decision at the end of 2022 to split with my former agent. Um, so beginning of 2023, I had a novel that I had just finished, cleaning up and getting ready for submission, and I started sending out queries like everybody else. Had a couple of full requests, and one that I thought was going to work out, but then it just, oh yes, I really like this, da 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 da, and then the offer just never came. It was just one delay after another, and we're going on like months. So I was kind of irritated by that, and so I went into StokerCon 2023 in Pittsburgh. I went into that hoping that I could talk to a few friends and talk to Sam Rebeline to find out who his agent is, who sold. I wanted to find out who sold Edenville to William Morrow, because that's a fantastic book and so weird that I was like, I'm not surprised. Like, it got published by a Big Five publisher, but at the same time, I was surprised that the weirdness did not deter them. So I talked to him about his agent, and it just so happened that week I had followed Becky on Twitter, and because I was basically just following agents that were kind of open to submissions and looking for stuff in my genre. The book I had to shop was very horror / weird fiction, cosmic horror kind of thing. So I was actively looking for agents like that. And first day of the con, my friend Daisha Arnold walks in with Becky. I didn't know it was Becky, and Daisha introduced us. And thank you again, Daisha, if you're listening. And I said to Becky, I'm like, why do you look familiar? And she says, because we just followed each other on Twitter, maybe? And she's like, I'm an agent? I'm like, I need to talk to you. And I didn't have an appointment with the pitch sessions that she was doing that weekend, but she made 45 minutes for me to just sit down and talk, and we just hit it off. The first thing she asked me is, why do you feel like you need an agent? And that was such a non-agent thing to ask, but applicable, because it's a real question these days. It's not like it was 30 years ago, where you absolutely have to have an agent if you want to get anywhere in publishing. Well, now you can have a successful career in the independent and small press space and never have an agent. So, I basically pitched the book. I talked about my career up to that point, where we were, where I wanted to be, and I wanted to make a stab at getting something with the big five or big four or whatever they are now, the big monopoly presses. And then you can't do that without an agent. It's very rare that you can do that without an agent. So, and honestly, I just wanted somebody in my corner, somebody that is a business partner, essentially, who's invested in my success. And it turned out to be a great conversation. She bought a copy of Devil's Creek from me that Friday at the author signing. I gave her the last printed arc of Coal Black and Infinite that I had, and by Sunday she had already read part of Devil's Creek and was interested. And so I sent her the manuscript for the new book, following Monday, and by Thursday I had an offer. And it's been great ever since. Like, I owe so much to her for her insight. She's very knowledgeable, and I can't sing her praises enough.
And
So that's
so,
how Becky happened.
yeah, yeah. And then kind of going forward, I mean, what have been some of the deals or conversations or pivotal moments that you are able to talk about? And that's probably a major caveat. That could be a
So I
difficult
can
one.
only talk about sales that have happened. We sold foreign rights in a couple of territories for Scanlines and for Devil's Creek. Devil's Creek will be coming out in Spain, I believe, at the end of this year, maybe this fall. Scanlines will also be coming out in Spain, and the book that we've been shopping for a while, we just found a home for it. That's all I can say, because that has not been formally announced in any respect other than social media and me posting me signing the contract. So, I'm happy to say that has a home. And even though it was passed on by quite a few publishers, we had a lot of good feedback on it and requests to see something else. So, that's very exciting for me. It's why I'm busting my ass to try and finish this draft of the new book. And yeah, it's been a very educational experience, because she comes from the bookseller world, so she's got insight into distribution and how bookstores actually order their books and what goes into deciding factors, what they stock and everything. And it's so much more complicated than you would ever think it is. So yeah, that's all I can really say, though. I can't talk about anything else that's in the works, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of this book that you said you're working frantically on, is this the Sundowner's Dance or is
No,
this?
the Sundowner's Dance is the one that we just sold.
Ah, okay, okay.
Sundowner's Dance is also exists in the Devil's Creek universe, but it's takes place here in Pennsylvania. It's not a rural Kentucky story.
Mm,
The book I am working on now is called Revelation Road. That is very much set in Kentucky, or parts of it. Um, the whole thing is like a chase from Detroit, Michigan to eastern Kentucky, deep in the heart of Appalachia.
Yeah, I recall, I think it was with Rob Olsen, you were saying as well, with this being a new Devil's Creek universe story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm calling that the Southland mythos.
yes,
So,
yeah,
yeah, everything going forward for me is going to involve the Southland in some way. It's more likely, it's going to be more likely than not that it'll exist there in that universe. Anything that doesn't would be the exception.
yeah, which brings us rather nicely to the latest collection,
Yes.
Cold Black and Infinite. And I mean, in many ways, it's kind of read like old school Stephen King, but with Ligotti's nihilism and then kind of flashes of Clive Barker. There's so much that's gone into it, and just as
I
you think you tonally get it, you throw something in like Happy Town Yuletide Massacre or Black Friday, and which were a complete aesthetic shift. But my goodness, was this an awful lot of fun to read.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I definitely wear my influences on my sleeve. Um, those are all everybody you named are, they're huge, have been had an impact on me. Their fiction has. So there's definitely a current of pessimism or nihilism running through all those stories, just in a kind of not quite sarcastic but smirky sort of way. I think Clay Chapman found most of the stories hilarious, which probably says more about him than me. But love you, Clay. But yeah, there's some dark humor in there that I'm happy that most people have picked up on. But also, the thing I like about collections and short stories specifically is that I get to try different things that I normally wouldn't write. Um, and when you put them together in a collection, it kind of serves as a greatest hits album of some sort, and also shows range. That was one thing that feedback I got on my first collection, like Little Things, was that it's the stories are a wide spectrum of types of stories. And I don't think Cold Black and Infinite is as wide a spectrum, but uh, there's still some variation in there. And speaking personally, Happy Town Yuletide Massacre is one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorites as well, in
Thank
fact,
you.
and we will get to that shortly. But of course, I mean, we should start with the opener, Midnight in the Southlands. And have you ever listened to the Shooter Jennings album Black Ribbons? Because it really
I have
gave me
not.
that vibe.
I haven't. I haven't listened to any of Shooter's stuff.
Yeah, Black Ribbons in particular is
Okay.
incredibly unique, and it has Stephen King as the kind of radio DJ.
That's
So
awesome.
you need to listen to
All
it,
right, you
and
sold me already. What is
Yeah,
it called again? I'm going to write this down.
it's called Black Ribbons. It is Shooter Jennings and Hierophant. But I can put it in the show notes, and I
Yeah,
can
please do.
send you an email as well with this. But
And it's an
yeah,
it's
album.
yes,
That's cool.
it's quite good.
Okay.
quite good. It's a masterpiece, Bob.
Yeah,
No,
it's
I haven't listened to that, but it's on my radar now. I'll probably check that out tomorrow.
Yeah, but I believe the impetus for this, in fact, was discovering the Valley View Ferry in 2021. So
Yes.
let's talk about that.
It, you know, so where I grew up in Kentucky is like you get on the highway I-75 and it's a straight shot north to Lexington, which is where I went to college. Now, on the way there, there's an exit and a big bridge that goes over a river called Clay's Ferry. It's Clay's Ferry Bridge. And because I just never thought about it, when my friend Haas, that's his nickname, but he's been Haas for as long as I've known him. When we went to visit him and his wife and stay with him for a few days, they told me about this ferry. I'm like, okay, there's a ferry? You can take a ferry across a river? He's like, yeah, you know Clay's Ferry? I'm like, oh my God, you just blew my fucking mind. That never occurred to me. So we, took some back roads, and you can go from Richmond, Kentucky to Lexington, Kentucky, completely off the highway, and you take this ferry. And it was such I've been on ferries before. There wasn't anything particularly special about it. It was a short boat ride. But it was, for me, the allure of it just being there and being something that I didn't know existed. And it's like it just materialized overnight for me. And that plus, my memories of Clay's Ferry Bridge, that used to be a popular place where people would kill themselves. I'll never forget my mom telling me that one day when I was in high school, some guy jumped off Clay's Ferry Bridge and he screamed the whole way down. She was very specific in telling me that he screamed the whole way down. How the fuck does she know this? She wasn't there. I'm just telling you what she told me. That has always stayed in my head. It's this, he immediately regretted his decision as soon as it was too late to do anything about it. He was content to do this until he was, in the arms of gravity. And then he's screaming all the way down. So that was kind of in the back of my mind when it came to Midnight in the Southland. And that, plus I was thinking about late night drives that I used to take in college after a bad breakup. The kind of the loneliness, the sadness of it all. And it all kind of just came together in this really melancholic story. It's very, people love that story and I'm grateful that they love it. But to me, it's a very sad story. Just because I know where it came from. And holding it all together is my love of Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. I used to listen to his, recordings of his radio shows when I was in college. That's where I really got into it. And it just seemed to fit. I don't know. I can't really say why it seemed to fit, but it just felt right.
Yeah, there's something incredibly disquieting and alluring about these radio conspiracy theory shows as
Yeah.
well. That you kind of keep listening, but you're also unsettled, which I suppose is a good metaphor for the state as to why we read horror in general.
Yeah. It's I guess for me, the appeal of Coast to Coast AM and those types of radio shows, like, there's a podcast I listen to every week called Jim Harold's Campfire. And it's basically people just calling in, talking about weird shit that's happened to them or experiences they've had, paranormal and other, just this weird things happening. And the appeal to me is one, you're hearing from other people that are just like you. You're hearing from people who could be your next door neighbor. We've all seen or experienced something we can't explain, or felt something we can't explain. And there's this uncanny side to reality that we all know, and sometimes it reaches out and touches us, but we can't quantify it with, science. We can't, provide absolute proof that yes, this is something that happened. You're just going to have to trust me, trust my word, trust my experience. And I love that. I love to, in my opinion, like, storytelling is something that's in us genetically. It is something that we have always done. Going all the way back to when, we're hunter-gatherers huddling around a fire at night and telling stories to our children because of the dangers that lurk outside of that circle of light. We're going back to when we were drawing on cave walls, stories of, this is something that happened. This is something that happened to me. And for that moment of time, as the storyteller is sharing their experience, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. Because if they're good at what they do, you are there with them. You are living it with them. And that's why I really look at storytelling specifically. Writing is just a method of storytelling, but storytelling specifically is sacred. It's a part of us. It's genetic. And that's one of the reasons why those types of shows always interest me, because it's not just weird people calling in talking about conspiracy theories. It's, these people are actually convinced that this stuff is real. And for, a fraction of the time, in my life, I can believe them. I can believe that these things are real. I know they're not, or maybe they are. I don't know. But to me, that's the appeal of it.
What's the weirdest or most unsettling thing that's happened to you in your life?
Oh, wow. So I don't remember if we talked about this on the last time we were on together, but a little bit of background on me. After my parents divorced, when I was very young, I was maybe still an infant when they divorced. My mom and I lived with my great grandmother for a time while my mom got on her feet. So my mom was like 20 when she had me, so she's still a kid herself. And so mom's working during the day and going to school at night. So my great grandmother / granny, as I call her, who was the basis for Imogene in Devil's Creek, I would sit with her. She would babysit me essentially every day, and we grew very close. And I saw some really weird shit in her house that I can't explain. And and I wasn't alone. Like, there are other members of my family that experienced weird things too, and we couldn't quite figure out or understand why. They all involved the upstairs bedroom. It was an addition to the house that was built on, and it's not like the lumber to build the room came from like a haunted forest or anything. It wasn't like that. And I wrote about this actually in my story, The Saving Granny from the Devil, which was partially autobiographical. There's a scene in that story that happened. It involved a stuffed animal moving on its own. I have this image in my head vividly, and I'll go to my grave swearing that it actually happened. People don't believe me. That's fine. I know what I saw. This fucking stuffed monkey crawled to the edge of its display shelf and fell off. I watched it happen. I see it in my head right now as I'm telling you about it. And it wasn't like a wind up toy or anything. It was just a stuffed animal. It was all cotton. And, that's something weird that happened to me. I felt other things, heard my name called, you know, while they're alone. Um, you know, strange shit. I can't explain it. I don't necessarily believe in ghosts. So what was it? I don't know. But it's a cool story.
Oh yeah. And I mean, what does that experience do in terms of how it impacts your own beliefs, I suppose, in terms of like spirituality, in terms of the afterlife, in terms of just these unexplainable things? Because, of course, we spoke before about you growing up in a very Christian town and
Mm-hmm.
turning away from religion. We've read Devil's Creek. If people are on edge as to what your thoughts towards, these small town religious communities
I
might
just I
be.
just wanted to make it clear so nobody's knocking on my door inviting me to church. Okay.
Yeah, and for those who still felt it was ambiguous, there is a story called Gethsemane towards the end of this collection, just in case they haven't got it yet. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm wondering what this, not just the stuffed monkey, but everything, the whole kind of culmination, the packaging of these weird experiences in your grandmother's house has done in terms of your own beliefs.
I mean, at the time, I was a very confused child. Like was raised to believe this. I didn't really turn away from religion until I was an adult. And because it was expected of me, I made a lot of attempts to try and conform myself into this mold, because it would have just made my life so much easier, and I just couldn't do it. So for a while, I believed it was ghosts, but realistically, that doesn't make sense. There was nothing bad about the house, nothing happened there. You know, it was just this thing that happened that can't be explained and never will be. It's funny you mentioned spirituality because I don't know if he listens to the show, but I was talking to Brian Keene a few weeks ago, and he's working on a follow up book to his End of the Road, his nonfiction book. He's working on a follow up to that, and he's big into thinking about the latter part of his life because he's getting up there in years. He's in his 50s, I think, and we were talking about, well, what happens when you die? It's that age old question, like, well, what do you think happens? And it this oddly enough had been on my mind, just trying to things I would like to believe, but ultimately just can't know. We won't know until we die. Uh, I'd like to believe that it's got more to do with quantum theory. Honestly, like I like there are infinite number of ourselves right now having the same conversation, but everyone's different. So, every moment you've ever had deja vu, every moment that you've ever felt like you've been here before, or you've had this conversation before, or you've said this thing and it just didn't feel right. I kind of feel like that. I want to believe that that's like a, a moment where one version of yourself is ending and it's unifying with another thread of yourself. Like, so what happens when you die? You basically step into another reality as yourself. How the logistics of that, I don't know. It's just something that I think about from time to time because I think the elements of quantum theory more plausible. than just having our essence live on as, some phantom figure in a house somewhere that's stuck there repeating the same thing over and over, or being, causing mischief to the owner because they don't like what color wallpaper they chose in their house. I mean, that's all fun to think about. It's all fun to, fantasize about in some ways. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to come back and haunt your ass. Well, no, I don't think it works like that. But I do think that there's some kind of scientific basis for what we would, in our ignorance, call an afterlife. So I'm sure that by this point you will have tons of your listeners either writing in to tell me I'm an idiot, or I don't know what I'm talking about, or how high are you right now? The answer is not high enough, apparently. Yeah, like these are, again, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if this is going to happen. It's equally as plausible that when we die, that's it. There is no continuance of self. The idea of self is just a balance of chemicals in our brains. This is why I found all those monologues in Midnight Mass to be intriguing. I loved them and didn't hate them because I thought they were, they're very well, they're conversations that I feel like more of us should be having outside of the realm of heaven and hell and, paradise after we die. If we could have like real conversations through a scientific lens about what happens after we die outside of the bounds of religion, I think we would be so much better off as a species. But I digress.
Mm-hmm. I think about the quantum theory of life and death a lot, and I always come back to how many times have I died?
Yeah.
And I because I feel like that there's moments in my life that I should have died.
Mm-hmm.
Near misses, accidents, stupid things I've done. It's like shit. I could have died. Are ghosts simply echoes of past lives that can be scientifically measured? We just don't have the tools to do it.
Yeah.
Based upon quantum theory. I mean, like you, Todd, I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there.
Yeah.
But it to me it makes sense on if I have died, how would I know it? Especially if it was an accident, if it was something that I never would have seen coming.
Mm-hmm.
How would I fucking know it?
Yeah.
How to put that into a story? Fuck, dude. I mean, I don't know. That's
yeah.
I don't know if it could be put into a story. It's
Like,
just pretty convoluted.
I think it kind of works like, I always think of Stephen King's example in Wizard and Glass with the thinny. The idea of like, you've got two planes of reality, like basically like pushed up against one another, and at some point they overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And could that explain hauntings? Maybe. I don't know. But it would it would make sense if, because sometimes I've heard stories of hauntings where there's a ghostly figure in the room, but they seem just as surprised to see you standing there as you are of them, and it's like you're both saying, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And it's kind of like one of those cases where realities have overlapped, or things are threadbare in between, and you're kind of getting a glimpse of what's on the other side just next door.
Yeah, I love that idea where the so-called ghost is equally as surprised as you
Yeah,
are.
it's like that movie, The Others, with Nicole Kidman that came out in the
Yeah,
early 2000s.
yeah,
It's exactly that, like two to the ghosts, we're the ghosts to them, and vice versa. It was really interesting, portrayal of that. And I don't know. I think that's something I'd love to see more in media, is, that conversation happening. Yeah, Bob, you're right. It's like, well, how would you know? Well, I mean, that's the beauty of it. You wouldn't. That's the nature of, how things are cosmically balanced and all this beautiful chaos.
Mm-hmm.
You have no way of knowing. And a lot of people think that's terrifying, but I find that there's freedom in that. It's like, well, now you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to worry about what's going to happen. If it happens, it happens. We're all going to die someday. So, why not just enjoy your time and be active in the moment, as opposed to concerned about, you know, oh, I gotta do this so that I can have a better afterlife. Fuck off. Just live your life and be a good person.